I have been thinking about process. I've been thinking about police evidence boards, how they pin the suspect's photos to the wall when they're trying to crack a case. I've been thinking about math equation chalkboards. I've been thinking about brainstorms and workspaces and places where people go to make sense of things, where they synthesize ideas. I have been thinking less about the wow and more about the how we get there. I have been thinking about process. I like a process that reframes product as byproduct, offshoot, side effect, spin-off, that puts the focus on the fact that getting it wrong is interesting. And getting it right is fine, but it's the struggle that is truly sacred. And this shit takes fucking time. So I have been thinking about process, and I have been working on a process. Earlier this month, I traveled to Mount Rushmore. In the most sacred of all the Lakota indigenous lands, our government carved the heads of 4 white men on a mountain. You almost have to admire the sheer audacity of it. The blinding, self-obsessive arrogance that fueled such a feat of engineering, a feat of such social, civic, and creative magnitude. I've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of photographs of this monument to power, privilege, and progress. I've regarded it with suspicion and derision. But in real life, I have to admit it's impressive as hell. The thing about beautiful art is that it can stir the spirit, regardless of all the reasons that we should despise it, reject its right to be. Mount Rushmore moved me for many reasons, but one of the most astonishing things about it is that it is finished. It is a tremendously well-executed idea, and it's a product in all its beautiful, awful irony. It was hard to make, and it took a lot of money and a lot of manpower, but they got it done. Now, just down the road, in response to an invitation from a Lakota elder in the 1940s, a rambling family of Polish Americans and some local skilled workers are carving Crazy Horse into a mountainside. Crazy Horse, who never signed a treaty, who never learned English or lived on a reservation, who toppled Custer at Little Bighorn less than a year before he died, a bayonet plunged in his back before his 40th birthday. Crazy Horse, who never even allowed himself to be photographed. Forget about tintype. This is the man whose likeness they are carving into granite on the face of a mountain. So, yes, it's complicated and a little bit controversial. The Crazy Horse Memorial is so enormous that they say all 4 of the Mount Rushmore heads can fit inside his ear. His face is 9 stories tall. The entire mountain is a work in progress, and once completed, this monument will depict this famous warrior in the round, riding astride his horse, pointing to the lands where his people are buried. If Rushmore is product, Crazy Horse is process. There is no date by which they promise to unveil the finished monument. The family-run foundation has twice turned down government funds that would speed things up because they believe in the power of private enterprise. Their work is funded by private donations and entrance fees paid by people who come to see this dream take shape. I read a story about reporters who asked Ruth, the artist's widow, when she thought the memorial would be finished. So she looked up at the sky and she feigned contemplation, and then she said, "On a Tuesday, I think." She died this May, so she won't live to see it. Neither did her husband, and frankly, I don't think I will either. But I don't think that really matters. You can see the monument from the road. Don't. Pay your $11 and get in there. A finished product is a beautiful thing, and Rushmore delivers. But a functioning process is sacred and beautiful. It isn't just a punchline, but a window into the whole complicated, painful, precious story of the thing. Crazy Horse is emerging from the dust of hard work, core values, and controversy, towering over the avenue of the chiefs. At a bend in the road is an unassuming sign, hand-painted. In curling script, it promotes the memorial's motto, "Never forget your dreams." Title: Physics and Climbing the Spiral. At the beginning of this process, everything came to me in metaphor. The language of physics, so elegantly aligned with my observations about human connection and relationships. Physics is the study of matter and its motion through space and time. It is the general analysis of nature conducted in order to understand how the universe behaves. It is the study of energy and force, how falling feels like flying if you wanted to go that way anyway. I study the physics of belonging. In particular, I observe the search for belonging in others, in order to better understand my own experience. I analyze human nature in order to understand why people behave the way they do. It seems to me that everything in the universe is connected, and I'm trying to get a handle on that. So naturally, I've been thinking about Newton. I've been thinking about Galileo and Socrates. I've been thinking about Plato and Archimedes. I've been thinking about all the people who never made the papers, but who still clawed at the questions of why are we here? And how does this work? I've been thinking about simple machines. They make things movable, easier, lighter, faster, doable. They increase capacity. I've been thinking that if you give me a lever long enough, I can move the world. That God's grace is a pulley, hoisting me up from my knees so I can take another pass at living. I've been thinking about how a particular man screwed me and how ultimately that is the root of why I have wedged myself between them. I've been thinking that I could take the ramp to save my knees, but we humans aren't built to want everything easier, just some things. These things are supposed to be simple. The wheel keeps turning. I've been thinking about physics, the study of matter and what matters, the study of energy and my excess energy, the study of force and the forces of attraction, repulsion, gravity, magnetism, everything pulling toward and tighter, all the coveting that we do and the universe does. How gravity means that even though the earth is massive, I am also made of mass. I matter. Ergo, I am made of matter. I pull Earth upward by the same degree that it is pulling down on me. Because for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and that isn't just a catchphrase, but a law. If you strike it, it strikes back. If you stroke it, it reacts with something more uplifting. So, you see, I have been thinking. I've been thinking about connection, about conviction, about the universe and how it behaves. Because perhaps particles crashing through space can help me trace why you feel so far away some days, why we are estranged even as we are the same twin clusters of stardust. Perhaps I am classical and you quantum, discrete and not always continuous in your behavior, but we smash and crash into each other anyway because the great golden net of everything in the known and unknown universe says we are all in this together. And as we matter more to one another, you're right, we do get heavier. It is more actual, less casual. We accelerate and spark. We illuminate the dark. We create our own draw. We move and we lag. We get caught riding the drag. Our gravity grows till it shreds our last nerve. And the theory of relativity states that somehow this is why time curves until it folds back on itself. Until I find myself enacting the same role I have enacted before with planetary bodies roughly the same size as this one. And I am orbiting predictably, elliptical and utterly mathematically unsurprising, if surpassingly bright and brilliant and gaze-worthy. Train your telescope on me if you like to love the stars. I am beautiful, celestial, enchanting as a comet trail, but don't be overly awed. Like everything in nature, I can't act outside the laws. And though I clutch the pattern and attempt to break and bend, in 46 million years, I'll probably pass this way again. It makes me feel better when I think of myself as climbing a spiral, instead of being stuck in an orbit of inevitability, repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. See, massive objects cause a distortion in space-time. They cause it to curve, and we feel this as gravity. It seems to me it's the same for the spirit. The big moments, the learning moments, the character building, fight or flight, sink or swim, grim and glorious moments cause us to go around the bend a little bit, curve in on ourselves so that we can loop around for another look, make sure we learned the lesson. This is the spiral. If we're awake to it, then maybe we have a shot at climbing up toward enlightenment instead of circling the drain. So, if it feels like I have been here before, that I'm playing a role that I know well, hopefully I am just climbing a spiral through territory that appears familiar but is not, in fact, the same. It is a gradient of changing dynamics, a landscape becoming increasingly arid, dotted with sagebrush, marked with the movement of tumbleweeds. From a train window, you can watch everything happen. Time curves, up, up, and away. Last summer, title, Going Away and the Lesson of the Strawberry. Last summer, I bought an Amtrak rail pass, and I took the California Zephyr west to Sacramento by myself. I crossed through Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and Northern California before transferring to the Coast Starlight, which carried me north into Oregon. The names of the train routes are wonderfully romantic. The Empire Builder, the Heartland Flyer, the Hiawatha, Keystone, Lakeshore Limited, the Southwest Chief, the San Joaquin. We were born to travel as we live and dream. On the train, I am suddenly giddy, snap, crackle, popping with a blossoming feeling of freedom. For a moment, I am holding the whole unlived journey before me. Miles will unspool before me under the wheels, the gentle rocking from side to side as we barrel west, the shadows lengthening and shortening across an expanse of mesas, sagebrush, arroyos, and churning rivers. I hold it all, and it bubbles over. I laugh out loud. Next to me is Megan. The conductor has seated us together because we're both traveling alone. Megan wears an ankle-length denim skirt, leather lace-up boots, a flowered kerchief in her straw-colored hair, which cascades down her back hand over fist. Maybe she's a Mennonite, I think. She smiles, and the gentlest touch of crow's feet play at the corner of her eyes. She has been outside, under the sun, for many, many days of her life. Megan is 31, she tells me, returning from visiting her brother's family in McCook, Nebraska. We chug politely and gently into a conversation that lasts all day long, all the way to Grand Junction. We are both single, unmarried, with no children, desiring a partner, but reconciling our aloneness with God and ourselves as best we can. Megan has 7 times visited Israel for the grape harvest, and she plays her violin in the open fields when they break. In Israel, they gather wild figs and pomegranates off the trees. In Colorado, on the western slope, she cares for her parents, works the family garden, and plays violin in the symphony. She tells me the quote that will anchor my journey. The safest place to be is in the center of God's will. To us, women traveling frequently to countries of conflict, this quote brings comfort. Megan teaches me about the strawberry plants. She says the first year, you must nip back the fruit to give the root system a chance to deepen and grow strong. The next season, the plants will bear even more fruit because they're better prepared for the task. Megan says God's voice rings in the lesson. Sometimes I will nip you back, even as you bear fruit. Take this as an opportunity to root down so that later you may rise up. One of the first things that Megan tells me is the last thing that I remember. The last time she visited her brother, someone jumped in front of the train. The engineer threw the emergency brake, but it was impossible to stop. Through the window, she could see the Amtrak and emergency vehicles arriving, and there was a long delay as they dealt with the death. Some passengers were annoyed to be so far behind schedule, she said. And I was saddened to hear that, but not really surprised. Our entitlement is one of the most unattractive things about us. Train conductor trivia. Ladies and gentlemen, you might be interested to learn that Grand Junction was so named because it is located at the confluence of the Gunnison and Grand Rivers. The Grand is what they used to call the Colorado. Welcome to the Western Slope. In Grand Junction, Megan is met by her father, and we part ways with a hug and well wishes and prayers, I think, secret ones, for the other to find her way. Title: Specialness and Sameness. By the time we arrive in Provo, it is almost midnight. I spend the next day in town, where it seems that everyone is dressed in pastel colors. I notice babies and pregnant women pushing strollers with more babies inside. I notice warehouses selling end-of-the-world emergency supplies. I eat frozen yogurt with BYU college students, and we laugh about nothing, the way old people and young people do. I remember reading about Brigham Young and how he brokered a deal for the Mormons to help build the Transcontinental Railroad, how the Irish found the Mormons insufferable, more so than even the Chinese, because they never drank and they never fought, and they stayed clean and well-mannered, even in the heat of the biblical desert. And without that last push of labor, who knows how long or if ever it would have taken for the railroaders to reach Promontory Point to drive that golden spike, that symbol of progress, deep into an arbitrary mound in the ground in the middle of nowhere. I am here to see my friend Anne. I met Anne at a summer camp, serving kids with special needs. Our memories of that place all involve laughter, lip syncs, dance contests, people piled on couches, heads on each other's bellies, laughing until we cry. That was the place that made me human. That was the place that taught me not how to love, but how to be loved. That was the place that made me believe that I might belong. In our tribe, our needs are special, but so are our gifts. We are known for what makes us different, but we aren't more different than the same. We are named for the doctors who define their careers studying what makes us special. Doctors Angelman, Asperger, Tourette, and Turner, Dr. Prater, Dr. Willie, Dr. Williams, Crone, and Down. We have fragile X's, extra Y's, parenting differences disguised as symptoms of our disorder. We have seizures that make us glow and shudder. Cerebral palsy, so we bob and stutter. Autism grants us our moment alone, but it isn't long before Down syndrome draws us together for hugs and high fives. We are vitally alive for as long as we can be. Medically, we're up against the wall, you see. So we are black sheep and theater geeks, junior league joiners and sensitive athletes, coming together as Catholics and Mormons, bad kids and good ones. We shouldn't exist. We are mismatched misfits. They say that we are entropy, but actually, we're self-organized criticality. This is something specific. It's a concept from physics. It means that we are the pattern that appears in a system just before it tips into chaos. We are humans holding hands at the edge of the world. A game of Red Rover where no one falls over. No one is too bent or too broken, too loud or soft-spoken, too ugly or weird. We come just as we are. We come frightened and brave. We don't come here as saviors. We come to be saved. Imagine that we all of us, are all living inside the same big house, but looking out of different windows. Our views and experience of the world can be radically different if we're only looking out. I see the front yard and the trunk of a tree, right? But you see the backyard and a view of distant mountains. And you see the dark brick wall of the house that's right next door. So the world, as I see and understand it, is a completely different world than the one that you know is right and true. But if we all turn inside and look within, we're probably no further from a friend than the width of a room or the length of a hall. We're not so different after all. My friend Josh and I came up with that analogy years ago, and we were proud of it. We clicked when he and I met because we were both artists, both camp counselors, both radically rocked by our work in the special needs community. We felt transformed by this discovery that self-acceptance hinges on our ability to accept others. We thought that we were the ones called to help, but really we needed help. We all need help. We are all hungry to reconcile our specialness and our sameness. We are all standing at the gate, asking to be let in. Nobody knows what they're doing. So Josh and I talked about that often, about that hunger to authentically belong somewhere, anywhere. But all this was before he died one morning while working out at the gym. They brought him back to life for a few days, but then he died again. I am in Greece when it happens. When I hear that he is stuck in a holding pattern between life and death, I am standing in a courtyard of a monastery high up on a hill, on an island named for a water serpent killed by Hercules. And I see a bee, or maybe it's a butterfly, and I watch it dip high and low, alternating between stay and go. And I say, it's up to you what you will do. Joy is bitter, and sweet is sorrow. So do what you must, and let my love follow. It is 2 days later in the hotel in Athens when I learn that he is dead and not to be resurrected. I change my flight from Denver to Vermont, where I will show up in my palms to the sky state of unknowing and do God knows what for his wife and 18-month-old son. Later that summer, I return to camp for the last time, and the campers write letters to Josh as part of a fumbling attempt to navigate their loss. Most of them are teenagers, and they experience a spectrum of cognitive and developmental differences. Some are verbal, some write and spell and story tell, and others draw or dream or seem altogether elsewhere. We are all looking out of different windows, but we're in the same house. Dear Josh, I hope you have a good time in heaven. I miss you a lot. Your best friend, Ryan. Dear Josh, I know you will love meeting my grandma. She was sweet, just like you. Love, Lauren. Josh, I am sorry, sick or dead, you, my head, camp I went to come together. I horse ride is fun. Keep your friends and campers. We all miss you lot. Some don't wear seatbelt, got getting to dead or sick. Love, David, keep my head, Hoffman. We roll up the letters on butcher paper banners, and we pack them into a trunk, along with mementos and stories, rocks and sticks, eagle feathers, and letters to Josh's infant son, Orion. We deliver the trunk to Katie, Josh's wife in Vermont. It is Pandora's box, and if and when she opens it, it will come with a prize but at a price. Dr. Martin Luther King said one of many lovely things. He said, "For some strange reason, I am never what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. But you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be." This is the way God's universe is made. This is the way it is structured. So that means we're all in this together. No man or woman left behind. Everybody in this time. Title: Manifest Destiny and Culture as a Coat. I am back on the train, rolling west toward Nevada. It is after midnight in Salt Lake City, and a large family boards the train, speaking loudly in a language I don't understand. I am asleep, sitting up. Too broke to pay the upcharge for a sleeper car, so here I am in the dead of the night, phasing in and out of a fever of hatred and sleepless confusion, thinking seriously that I must be forgetting English because I don't understand what they're saying, even though they're saying it so loud. The next morning, I'm a slave to my compulsion to know more, to understand more, to combat my own annoyance, that seed of prejudice, with an arsenal of information, a hail of data that will shame me into tolerance before impossibly, hopefully blooming into actual compassion. This is complicated, do you see? Learning to love one another? It's complicated. Finally, I ask them outright, and I learn that they are Tongan. Google tells me that Tonga is the only country in the world with a Mormon majority. Why should the Christians and the Muslims be the only ones with green thumbs successfully seeding their ideas? I admit I am surprised to learn that 1 out of every 4 Tongans in the US calls Utah home. The Mormon missionaries did their job well. In this present social and political climate, we are so frightened of missionaries. They are dangerous and unpredictable, holding secret meetings to advance insidious agendas among the local people. They come bearing rice and corn, and they warn of the catastrophe of homosexuality and the finality of God's terrible judgment. They are smiling do-gooders who look you in the eye and break bread with your family and farm their own food. Who does that? But seriously, they are usually liked well enough wherever they land, or they bring enough resources into the community that it's not that big a deal to leave them there. They typically strike a chord with the social landscape among the locals, or their ideas probably wouldn't take root. But nevertheless, among Americans at home, the work of evangelicals abroad is complicated and unpopular. Doing anything in God's name is rife with controversy. Politicians point to fundamentalist forces and violence. Academics cite sources, and science says God is a sidestep at best because these questions have answers already. These riddles are solved. Darwin and friends have shown we evolved. So why are we still nation hopping? Why go abroad? Why in the world are we still talking about God? Nobody asks that question in the Sahara Desert in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. It is a country of sand, roughly the size of New Mexico, located in northwest Africa, just south of Morocco. The landscape is dunes like you've read about, like you've seen in the movies. And the sand buries the cities, and then the people dig them out. And then the sand buries the cities, and the people dig them out. The wind scoops the sand and slings it through the air. It can bring down a house in barely more than a year. Truly no one there is talking about whether or not God is real. God is littered through the language. Allahu Akbar, Assalamu alaikum, Alhamdulillah, Mashallah, La ilaha illallah, Wallahi, Inshallah, Bismillah. Thanks be to God. Praise God. God is great. If Allah wills it, it will be. It's up to Him and not to me. Because God is really great, you see? God giveth and He taketh away. We're not more different than the same. Above the vast Sahara, the sky is blue and big. When the sand buries the cities, the people start to dig. Just before 7 a.m. on the train, the Tongan family is finally asleep. And I head to the observation car, hoping for solitude in this quiet hour. With a coffee and a window seat, I read and write and eavesdrop, and the travelers trickle in. Across the aisle from me, a teenage girl reads David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. She is brave, bold, deeply misunderstood, I assume. Plugged into her headphones. Train conductor trivia. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look out the windows of the left side of the train, you might see some wild Mustangs roaming the riverbed this morning on the way into Reno. I scour the landscape, looking for the wild ones. I cannot find them. I keep looking all the way into the biggest little city in the world. When we arrive in Reno, we transfer to a bus because there's some work being done on the rails between here and Sacramento. On the bus, the mother of the Infinite Jest girl sits next to her so that the girl doesn't have to share a seat with a stranger. No vacancy here, move on down the aisle. Once the bus is fully boarded, the mom moves back to sit next to her husband, giving her daughter space. The things moms do while they wait for their teenage daughters to love them again. It hurts. And I remember. I think about daughters and mothers and fathers. I think about Amy, who I met on Anzac Day on the rooftop restaurant in Gallipoli in Turkey. We ate fish and meat and sliced tomatoes and cucumbers dipped in sour yogurt and creamy hummus dusted with sumac at a table of Turks and Australians who had gathered in Gallipoli to commemorate events that occurred before any of us were born. I am there at the table, and I'm trying to understand Amy. Amy is from Canberra, and she works for immigration in Australia, reviewing applications for asylum, researching the validity of claims of persecution. In her line of work, Amy has come to consider most everyone a liar. I am fascinated by Amy. Amy who hates people but who loves ants, who understands ants, who studied ant colonies in university and dreams of moving to Hawaii to accept the job that she was offered to study one of the largest living ant colonies on the planet. Amy, who turned down that job when her father broke his neck surfing and required the kind of care that a daughter must give a father. Amy, who takes care of her father and hates her job at immigration and dreams that all the people represented by her piles of paper are ants, marching in tiny moving lines. My heart breaks for daughters and fathers and mothers and sons all over the world, all trying to honor each other, trying to give each other space, but then also take our place when it's time to step up and engage. The concept of honor confounds me profoundly. Over time, it gets more, not less, complex. I am in Turkey alone because I am here to see about a boy. I play the American woman that he's read about. Luscious, lascivious, batting my lashes, rewarding him with yeses when he asks for what he wants out loud. Things get sticky for both of us when he wants to carry my bags. I refuse automatically, it's a knee jerk, and suddenly we're mired in cultural quicksand. I try to understand how my choice to project independence impacts him, makes him smaller in the eyes of his peers. I try to peel away my own programming to think of culture as a coat and not a skin, as something I can remove if the climate allows. And in doing so, I observe the truth of his predicament. I see how my need to need nothing leaves him with nothing to do. The other men frown at him, think less of him. And this is so I might think more of me? I don't know what it's for, honestly. With a little time and space, I'm able to see that my Turkish lover doesn't want to own me or control me. He doesn't want to diminish or dismiss my strength. He just wants to play his role as he understands it. He wants to show me his capacity as a token, as a gift to me. So I'm softened, but still not sold. Because over millennia, the effects of dominance are the same. In honoring me, he elevates me. I become special, rare, but perhaps not to be trusted with my own care. In order to honor his role as provider and protector, I must alter how I see my own, a role I've grown to question, true, but not to the point yet of putting it down. As an experiment, this is interesting, enriching even, a jaunt into gender roles as portrayed by Bottom and Quince and the other mechanicals. But as a lifestyle, my time in Turkey teaches me that for now that way of life is still untenable. I don't know how to unlearn my lessons of self-reliance. I can wear it as a coat every now and again, but I don't think I'm comfortable in that skin. Title: Stockton, Modesto, and Mercy. The bus pulls into the station in Sacramento. It's the end of the line for the Zephyr. I've been invited to attend a women's campout in Northern California, up in the drought-dried hills above Stockton and Modesto. I've been asked here to speak, to share my perspective on how we do this thing called life one day at a time. I accept the invitation because there's something I've been trying to figure out about women. As a girl who grew up as one of the guys, I've spent years disguised as a maven of masculinity. I'm assertive, aggressive, I project forward and out. I confuse yielding and surrender with weakness and white flags. I know how to bear down, but I balk at surrounding, embracing, containing. So there are lessons that need learning. I have questions. I need schooling. I don't really want to spend the weekend getting to know strange women. But I'm not sure that I like that about myself, so I go. See, it's hard for me to act like a person sometimes and not an anthropologist. I'm really good at best behavior, but true connection is hard for me. Cindy has one leg, and she stands at the edge of the lake, smoking in the 100-degree heat. She and Denise are ex-girlfriends. When they pull their medicine cards, Denise is the fox, able to beguile, but Cindy is the owl, able to see through anything. I pull raccoon, the generous protector, the champion of the underdog, coming to the aid of all the disenfranchised, but I pull the card reversed, which means that I am not being compassionate or generous enough with myself. So if it feels like I'm drained, if it feels like there's no water in the well, then I must conserve my resources and take care not to scatter my seeds on stones. This moment of alignment, of feeling seen, is the reason I got on a train. My phone has been off for 2 days, and I spend my afternoon dunking under the cold compress of the lake. It is hot, and I am not whole or broken in this moment. I do not quake with self-obsession. I am just skin, flesh and blood and best intentions, ripe to wrestle with big questions like, why are we here? And how does it work? Later that evening, I stand barefoot at the water's edge, and I tell my story to 40 women sitting in a semicircle with their feet in the sand. The veil lifts for a moment. I realize I'm deep inside the spiral. I've been here before, projecting a brand of expertise cloaked as my experience. But if I am to tell the truth about my path to self-acceptance, then it's been a trail hard blazed, a way razed and ravaged, savage and unscalable, smudged and mudded, flushed with shame. Shame is the game that never ends. It's a trap door that leads to a basement with a trap door, that leads to a cellar with a trap door, that leads to a bunker with a trap door. Shame doesn't care how smart you are. My favorite fantasy is cutting my gut with a blade, carving my excess weight away. I think I'd trade my talent, brain, my brilliant wit, my guts, my grit. Some days I'd give it all away to look good in a bikini. I'm sick with aching envy of women who are skinny. Shame is a poisonous blossom blooming. It can't be clipped with common pruning. Shame is a flame fanned by fear and popular opinion. I think of Fazia. Fazia is 12 years old, a Muslim, a middle schooler, a Kenyan refugee in Colorado. She told me one day, after I finished teaching her and her peers, that she was nervous to get her period because she'd heard of a thing called cramps. Her hijab that morning was orange, twisted and coiled over the top of her head like a unicorn. She was proud and vital, brilliant in the sun. "Miss, you're not like other teachers." She eyed me suspiciously. "Why not?" "It seems like you really want to know us." And I do. After Fazia told me about her fear of cramps, her 13-year-old classmate said she'd gotten her period when she was only 11. Her mother had given her condoms. Now, this was against Muslim law, of course, but she doesn't think her mom is a real Muslim. Fazia interjected, asked if condoms keep out the spurn. I balk at the tricky territory. Okay, my prepubescent, middle school Muslim audience is staring at me. But again, thank God, the classmate was confident. "They're like a balloon," she said. Fazia fires back, "I know they are because I blowed one up once." Now I am frozen, rooted to the spot, agape in horror, but terrified of showing any reaction lest it cause Fazia shame. She tells me that she found the condom laying in the grass at the park, that she thought it was a balloon, so she blew it up huge with her mouth. When it happened, all her friends laughed until they cried. And when Fazia's sister told her what it really was, she spit it out. And then she washed her mouth out with soap 5 times, and the next morning she brushed her teeth 6 times. I think of how I will probably be the last adult in the world to ever hear that story out loud from her lips. Because as her life experience grows, so will her shame. And there's nothing I can do to spare her. There are parks and children in parks and condoms in parks and a terrible tumble from childhood to adolescence just waiting in parks, just waiting to seal the envelope of our fate with a long lick of shame. I think of Dexter, a 17-year-old boy I've known and loved for years. I think about how his sources of shame are obscure to me, cloaked in the mystery of autism and nonverbal communication. He's a cloudy opal. On a road trip to South Dakota, he tries to push past me with all of his force, desperate to visit the tourist attraction, teeming with people, unwilling to accept that because he is 17 and because we must all of us in this global community, despite our vastly different values and experiences, cognitive, cultural, physical, and otherwise, because all of us must find a way to live together, I will not let him join the others so long as he is naked. He really doesn't understand. And he locks himself up on the bus, where he marches furiously up and down the aisles, taking sweatshirts and backpacks and shoving them out the open windows. I collect the items slowly, muttering platitudes like, "I can see that you're frustrated. I understand that you would like to go inside. I would like to take you there, and you can as soon as you put some clothes on." He rips his diaper off with a yowl and chucks it out the window at my head. I sit on the pavement and wait it out, tired of pretending like I have any idea what the fuck is going on. See, it's too much pressure to pretend like all these things make sense. The cycle of shame and self-loathing, the holy wound of desire and despair. These are mysteries. These are fractals of our fractured selves, patterns repeating and displaying at every scale. At some micromolecular level, perhaps there's a purpose, a particle, a principle at work that clarifies this chaos, but for now, I release the need to know. I let it go. There is a temple. There is a temple. There is a hot and wet and steaming temple, a place I go to respect this riddle of being a spiritual self in a material mold. There is a place I go to hold space for sacred questions. It is a bathhouse called Lake Steam, and it is on West Colfax Avenue in Denver. It is Ladies' Day, a Monday afternoon, and I am naked in the tiled room. I am waiting in line for Mercy. She is busy most days. Women waiting for her to touch them, scrub them, soap them, salt them. Women are waiting for her to touch them. See, mercy is grace, a gift we don't need to earn to deserve. She is naked. I am naked. So when I lay face down on her table, she must reach to scrub the far side of my back, and it buries my face in her belly. And see, her skin is sliding against my skin, and it slips and slides against me, and we are skin and not ideas. We are not statements, not postures, not pillars. We are flesh. We are manifest. We are slippery when wet. We are real. She buffs the calluses off of my feet and the chip off my shoulder, her hands circling my breasts. She rubs my belly like she's washing clothes in a river. She's thorough and efficient. She grips me. She grabs me. She gets me. The full length of my life Mercy has stood in the steam, dismantling our self-hatred. I do not know her clothed. Naked at a bathhouse in Idaho Springs, my cousin weeps. It's a Thursday evening. She asks me, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is all this worth it? Is it worth it to pull back the veil and keep on pulling? Like a snakeskin, like a hangnail. Is it worth it to wake up, to stake our tent down, to stay in the game and not bring the axe down? My cousin asks me if it's worth it, and I shake my head no and say yes, yes, yes. The answer is yes, because it's this or drown. This is the only game in town. So I say yes. I tell her yes. I arrive at the altar of mercy to pay homage, to acknowledge that I am born of yearning. I have a holy wound of longing, that long cord longing to be retracted to wholeness, belonging. Soap and warm water remind me that I come from dirt. I am made of dirt. I will return to dirt. I am earth and not air. I am here and not somewhere. I wait in line when I have to. I am not in a hurry. I'm not the only woman waiting. There are old women, young women, black, brown, and gold women, pink, red, and white, wrinkled and tight, women taut and tiny-chested, bigger women, bigger-breasted, mounds and curves that boldly bounce, bellies spreading and pronounced, folds and bulges, crinkled pouches, innies and outies and varicose veins, bruises and bushes and landing strip lanes, cellulite that pocks and ripples, tattoos, and every kind of nipple. We are women hungry. We are women thirsty. Together we wait to be touched by mercy. It is Tuesday afternoon, and I have just finished teaching. I sit with Adriana, who has bandages on her wrists, and I talk about cutting like it's a thing we all do. Because you know what? It is a thing we all do. At some point, at some time, with some blade, somehow, it is a thing we all do. So I talk about cutting and the pendulum between I want to wake up and I want to die, die, die. And I try to offer what I can, which is maybe just enough for now, but never really quite enough at all. And she asks me if it's worth it. She means about art, but we're talking about life because there isn't really a difference between the living and the how we are living. So I say, art is a wheel and axle, trampling the weeds of worry and whatever else in its arc of wonder. Art is a mystery and a machine. And I tell her that like any weapon, it must be wielded, but it won't be owned. I tell her when she wants to pick up a razor, she should pick up a pen. It's a platitude. Maybe. But I actually do mean it. It saved my life. It might save hers. Wednesday morning, and a woman named Molly is crying on my sofa. She cries because she loves a man she doesn't want to love. A man whose capacity she exceeds without trying, but she knew this from the start, and now she loves him, and it hurts when he wants to let her go. I tell her sometimes mercy feels like malice, that the heart bleeds even as it blooms. Catch and release is a cruel game, a sport for suckers and cowards who want to have their cake and eat it too. As women, we're the fish, right? We're supposed to be the lucky ones if we get thrown back alive. If he takes the high road, cuts us loose in time so we survive. Am I supposed to feel lucky with a hook in my lip? When the man who casts the fishing line is cruel and cold and callous? Forgive me, but sometimes mercy feels like malice. A man can take a blade and hold it carefully between his finger and his thumb. He can snip the bud so it cannot be resown to stem. But women, we prefer running with scissors, gathering crumbs and calling them cake because they once had been cake, and maybe they could be cake again if we could just gather all the pieces back together again. There's only one thing that women hate more than men, and that is other women. We disparage our parts and prettiness. We poison our hearts with pettiness. We are sisters and sworn enemies, alike but unlikely to align. We want to be better. We actually wish we were kinder, and so we are waiting for mercy. Sick in our envy of each other's skin and hair, swooning and swelling with pleasure as we imagine how we'd carve her with a thin hat pin, how we'd flay the flatness of her belly, how we'd skewer her shining eyes. We despise her for her mouth, her pornographic mouth ajar. She's hot, and the thought of her riding him invades my flaming mind until I black out with rage, suddenly awake to my capacity to stake her through the heart. I will count to 10, or collapse with weeping. But one thing is given, we know we cannot trust women. They only want their own hearts healed. But we can only trust women because they've been used as we've been used. And so we yield to this paradox. It confounds us and exhausts us. And so we are begging for mercy. We come naked. We come with nothing but our palms up, soaking wet in our surrender. We beg for mercy, to cleanse us of our brokenness, to scrub us of our vanity, restore us to our sanity. Mercy, can you save us from how much we fucking hate us? Mercy, can you tell us we're enough just as we are? Mercy, will you make us touchable and lovable, free and fully fuckable? Mercy, are we monsters? Can you make us come to life? Chloe asks me if it's worth it. The college student who dreams of patchwork farms, who dreams of tilling soil with her bare hands. She takes me to a cemetery in Boulder at midnight on a weeknight because there is a grave where she feels grown, where she feels not lonely, though alone. She is alive in a field of corpses, and she asks me if it's worth it. These women, many women in college, in meetings, in church basements, in bathhouses and coffee bars, barefoot in a semicircle at the edge of a lake east of Modesto with their toes in the sand and their tents staked in the earth. They ask me if it's worth it to go the long way round the bend, upend the status quo. They think I know, because I've died and been reborn, burned and turned to ash, fed on tears and searing hope, broke open my own heart to start again. I've done this again and again. And so the women ask me if it's worth it because they think I know the answer. But all I do is I find another woman and I ask her the same thing. I find Edith in Uganda, washing my laundry by hand. Diane in the corner office with the purple crystal in her palm. Jennifer Rose and Maura Jean and mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers. And I ask them, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is all this worth it? To pull back the veil and keep on pulling? Like a snakeskin? Like a hangnail? Is it worth it? Don't you fear that you will drown? They say, this is the only game in town. And so I go to Mercy. And I wait for her to touch me, for her to soap me, scrub, and feel me. I wait for her to heal me. At the lake, I have finished speaking, and the sun is sullen, setting. The women rise and thank me. I thank them back. And gratitude's a centrifuge, humming as it spins, condensing us to friends and family, maybe just for one night only, but it's enough for now. Title, Trespassing. I leave California and I head north to Oregon on the Coast Starlight Line. It's an overnight trip, and again, I do not ride in the sleeper car. I sleep sitting up in coach. Oh, how long a night can be. I understand it backwards, beginning after it was over, rewinding back into the past when it happened. Someone is dead. There was a trespasser in the night, a suicide. I woke to the emergency brake, and the squealing went forever. The conductors were running, and keys were jangling, radios hissing, and then sleep sucked me under. Then again, a man was screaming. 3 times he woke up screaming, and the last, it was so long and loud, the length of the car leapt awake, wide-eyed, craning their necks with fear. In another car, a boy cursed at his grandmother and shit his pants. And the smell and the sounds kept them awake and praying for morning. I'm confused as I listen to the conductor's voice on the intercom the next morning. The conductor's voice is somber as he delivers the news that we are a few hours delayed due to the unfortunate presence of a trespasser in the night. I lean toward a woman sitting near me. I'm sorry, but does trespasser mean that somebody committed suicide? And the woman nods confidentially. It takes a few hours for the incident to appear in the papers, but Google confirms it. At the news of the delay, many of my fellow passengers are huffy, rolling their eyes. And I think of Megan from Grand Junction, riding the rails from McCook, Nebraska. I think of the suicide she mentioned on my first day of travel. Then it sounded so novel, so archaic, but apparently it's common. They say the sound a body makes is a lot like hitting a pumpkin. In the observation lounge, I spend another sunrise with coffee and my own company. There is a woman alone, waiting for the dining car to open. She says she saw the lights of the emergency trucks when the fire engine came to hose down the engine. Her number is called and she rises, and then she turns and she says, this trip was for her daughter, who tried to die on the tracks. Angels swooped her out, she says. I took this trip to get over it. And then last night, trespasser, suicide. The grandmother going to Seattle says, you can't feel sorry for that. He's going to hell. All the angels and all the demons ride the train, and they tear each other's hair and clothes, and they snap at strangers when they are tired. And I smile when they smile, and I laugh when they laugh, and I share my table with a red-headed white boy who is translating Japanese to English. And the Jamaicans en route to Alaska say, the secret is that you can't let anything bother you. But I've always gone the other way. I take everything in. I have no sieve, no filter. I embrace and swallow. In that way, I am decidedly feminine after all. I am bothered, disturbed by the notion of framing a person's final act of despair as criminal and not simply tragic. Railroad tracks are private property, owned by the freight companies crisscrossing the country with cars of coal and construction supplies, compressed gases, and hazardous materials. When a critical incident occurs, it's because someone is breaking the law, trespassing on the tracks. This is an elegant example of how we control public perception using language. In the Department of Justice, they call prisoners offenders. They call them that to remind them and us of their permanent guilt. Offenders belong to a tribe of people who offend, who are offensive. On the train tracks, men and women, too despondent and often too drunk to go on, opt for the efficiency of meeting a 400-ton train face to face. They don't commit suicide. They trespass themselves to death. That afternoon, I arrive in Eugene, Oregon, and I fall exhausted into the arms of old friends. I feel disenchanted, bruised, wary of strangers. We head to Ashland and the Shakespeare Festival, where we are appropriately respectful of the healing power of 400-year-old poetry. After the play, we run into Ernesto, an actor my friend Dan knows from a former run of another show, and Ernesto traps us in a red leather booth at a bar. He buries us in the insight he gained from his recent experience at a landmark self-improvement seminar. Through the glare of his conviction, though, one thing rings true. He says, "What are you waiting for? You seem ready for something different." But you have to distinguish your story about yourself as separate from your actual self. That may have been who you were, but it is not who you are. And he gives me an orange wristband that says fearless. What the fuck? I put it on. Title, Deus Ex Machina, God from a Machine. 4 days later, I'm back on the road again, renewed and recharged, buoyed by laughter and creative community. It is time to start retracting back, rewinding the tape, releasing the tension on the tether that allowed me the space to get to know myself better, or something. I think it's just time to go home. I wonder if, after all, I am a mostly broken thing. Can I shift from a hollow well to a bursting fountain? Experience my own vitality and movement, my aliveness, simply by going away and then coming back? How do I know that I'm climbing a spiral and not chasing my own tail? I seek evidence of a distance traveled. And so I take pictures, and I write poems, and I talk to people, all kinds of people. I try to tie it all together. I think about growth and change, the process of progress. I think about Darwin and patterns of extinction. There's this evolutionary model that says that we're as unstable as a growing pile of sand, always sliding down the edges, scrambling for a steadiness that lasts only until the next stiff wind, or until the steepness of the pile tempts gravity to tug us to our knees again. In this climate of instability, we evolve quickly or die. We are frogs who need sticky tongues to catch flies. We are flies who need slippery bodies to fend off frogs. We must stay relevant or we will become obsolete. And so we evolve and evolve and evolve, but everyone and everything else is evolving too. And so after all of our efforts, we are perhaps not yet extinct, but still unstable. And they call this the Red Queen effect. The Red Queen, who tells Alice in the book Through the Looking Glass that in this land, you have to keep running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. And on the train, I am that queen, riding these rails as fast as I can, going away just to retract, getting ahead just to come back, hoping to grip something, hoping to grab it, pin it like a butterfly and catalog and track it. I am hoping to catch myself in the act of living. I am desperate to mark it, lest I mess up and miss it. I am in motion. All things are in motion. The theory of relativity states that an electron hurtling through space is actually not the one hurtling. We are. We are zipping through the firmament while electrons enjoy the privilege of considering themselves at rest, because really, why shouldn't they? They never did anything to hurt anybody except explode in a bang so big it built all of us. And God does not oppose this. God thinks electrons are funny. They are his tiny henchmen. Their sense of humor is sophomoric at best. What can I say? They love fart jokes. This is true, I think, of all the best designs, not to mention the designers. Those guys aren't so different. They unwind. They enjoy their time outside the laboratories of their minds. They even fear and doubt and feel, and they laugh if you slip on a banana peel. Outside in Utah, the terrain is sage and chalky canyons and tufts of brush on mounds cut deep by shadows in the dawning day. I write in the lounge and observation car, my now usual haunt on early mornings, and I eavesdrop and tune in and tune out. The windows are speckled from a momentary rain last evening through the Nevada desert. Now the canyons give way to a mountain valley, and cows nose their way through fields of yarrow. I don't want to go home, but I can't stay here. The train roots me to the world like a spine. I am aligned and also fluid. I carry only what I need. By now I have met all the others. The ones running or coming and going, the ones combing it over it all in their minds, the every other outcome shufflers, moving between cars, always sliding open doors, lingering in the passage over the rails. I met the ghosts, the ghouls, the grandparents, the foreign travelers, the sideshow slingers, the poverty-plagued, addicted, conflicted, coerced, and steamrolled, the old of spirit, young of not much, the cusp creepers, the history buffs, the accidental tourists and criminals by negligence, the structure kings, the narrow gaugers, the wheelers, the dealers, the gringos, the Yanks, and migrant workers, the real commuters, the dealers, the wheelers, the mothers of dead and almost dead daughters. I greet them like water. I flow out and around. And we roll through towns, and they blow that whistle. And in the fields, there are people waving. And I think, I can do this. I can do it if it's like this. If people still come running at the whistle, if they wave and shield their eyes against the sun, if there are depots, old brick buildings with wooden benches, oil gleaming in the afternoon light, if I can anchor here a moment, not alien, not accident, not wrenched from time and space, if I can share this place until the train leaves the station, then I can fashion some function, a purpose, a presence, a reason. That thing that only seems important for a season, only in the station, never on the track. Then we are too busy moving to wonder why we do. We don't think so far ahead or back. I envy the surveyors, those grand explorers with their palms skimming sweetgrass and their ruddy necks and freckled noses. Do you suppose that space is a place that waves like a prairie? Or is every frontier twinkling with its own strange light, frightful and new? I wonder things like that. I do. We are finally winding through Arvada in the brilliant end of the affair light. We are nearly 2 hours behind schedule, which feels about right. There are things that I thought I would say, stories that I thought I would tell, like the couple from Idaho I dined with at lunch, alternating corn and potatoes on their farm, traveling to Chicago to scoop up their grandsons for the summer. Or the older woman who lunched alone but spoke only of her husband her husband, and how her son was Peter Keating from Ayn Rand, don't laugh, and how I should raise kids in Palo Alto for the schools. The maybe Mennonites speaking maybe German or maybe Finnish or maybe Swiss, and the diabetic who maybe swooned or maybe had a heart attack or maybe screamed before they stopped the train and called the paramedics, according to on whom you choose to eavesdrop. The Indiana truck driver and his family from outside Shipshewana in Amish country. How the spirit behaves like space. How the mystical behaves like the mechanical. About the kindness of strangers and how sometimes there's God so quickly. And how Blanche Dubois and so many of us know that and experience it when we open our husks and let it happen. The depot in Denver is only temporary, allowing for construction at Union Station. So after we roll steadily through Union Pacific Rail Yard and the Burlington Santa Fe Rail Yard, they bring the train in backwards, rewinding us until my destination is my point of origin. My alpha is my omega, and the beginning is the end. I shall dump things and then go. Thank you. Please, I invite all of you to stay a few minutes if you'd like and enjoy the rest of the process. Here it is in front of you. It might mean a little more now. Thank you for coming and good night.